looking for him in the cave. The strange thing that they found right away was they found a pair of his tanks near the entrance of the cave.
Which we mentioned before.
Mm-hmm, we talked about that before, so that was weird. The location of them is weird because typically what a diver does is you don't leave all of your air in one place.
Yeah, you drop tanks on the way.
You drop tanks, it's like breadcrumbs. You drop tanks so you can A, find your way back out, and B, get some air. If you really need some air, you got a low tank, you can switch them out. Mm-hmm. So it's odd that they were there.
Somebody said that it looked like they were placed by somebody who didn't know what they were doing.
Oh, yeah, you do hear that.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a lot, and
Well, now there were 3 tanks, right?
I believe there was, but what I do want to touch on real quickly is there have been a lot of things that have been said in the media, and we've started saying some of this as well, which is questioning his diving abilities. And so when we say things like that, I don't want it to come across as we say Ben was an idiot. It was he was doing things that were not done the way that a proper cave diver would have done. I just want to make sure.
Or he didn't put those tanks where they went.
Yeah.
That's also a very valid point, but I just want to cover that because I've noticed it's kind of happened a couple of times. So
we're not saying that Ben, I mean, he may have been a novice.
Inexperienced. Yeah. He was a novice and shouldn't have been doing what he was doing.
Probably.
But that's completely different.
Yeah, he was an experienced scuba diver, but not in caves, yeah. By the way, so this place was very, very popular, Vortex Springs, with scuba divers?
Yeah.
And so scuba divers coming and going every day?
Yep.
Okay, so it's strange that nobody noticed those tanks.
Well, they may have noticed the tanks. It may have been that a diver who was like, oh, well, there's somebody obviously in the cave. That must be his tanks.
Okay, so here's a question.
Yeah. I see the look on her face. She's going to hit me with a zinger.
Yeah, here's a question for you. A real brain puzzler, if you will.
Real doozy.
So Eduardo unlocked the gate for him Thursday night, and it's a padlock with a key.
Correct.
Oh, how did it get locked again?
Well, Ben could have locked it, but it was locked, correct?
When?
Well, that's something that's a really good question. Is that I'm assuming that Eduardo unlocked it and maybe even handed the padlock over to Ben, just in case some prankster wouldn't come along and lock
not
it.
At that time of night. I imagine that if Eduardo unlocked it, he left the unlocked padlock on the loop.
Yeah.
He would have given the lock to Ben. Ben has no use for it.
Well, the use is that you have it with you so nobody's going to lock you in.
Yeah.
But if nobody else is expected to go in that night, then what's the problem?
But he definitely didn't leave the key, right?
Yeah.
So as far as we know,
no.
Eduardo unlocked the gate and then
at some point later on, the gate got relocked. It had to have been relocked at some point, yes.
It was relocked?
Eventually. I mean, it's not as if when they, I don't believe that when they went down, the divers went down looking for Ben, they said, hey, look, the gate's still unlocked. I'm sure that some employee who was looking around went, nobody's been in here today. Somebody left the gate unlocked, and they relocked it. I imagine that would have happened the next day, but this is speculation.
Or Ben relocked it.
No, absolutely no idea when that could have happened.
For me, that's a really, really, really important detail.
You're right. It is. It's the bubbling gun in this case, and I don't know.
Okay.
I have no idea when that gate got relocked.
Great. Okay.
Zinger done.
Yep.
Okay, so let's continue on with the story here. So Ben's parents come to the area and they stay there while the search has begun for their son. They've made some not so great choices in the way that they've discussed the case with social media specifically. They've peeved some people off in the diving community because
poor choices of words.
I mean,
it's poor choice of words is exactly what it is. It's not like they're intending to anger anybody.
Yeah,
they actually know they need these people's help.
What I'll say is that they they have said things in the way that you would expect grieving parents to say them.
I'd agree with that. So while they're there, there's divers in the cave looking. One of the things we talked about in the beginning is that this spring, obviously because it's an upwelling, it overflows. The water overflows out through and drains into Blue Creek, which then goes into some swampy areas because it's Florida.
And of course, they checked those for corpses.
They checked all of that. They ran dogs through the area. They searched it. So nobody is found at this point below or above the water. So Ben's body is completely disappeared. His possessions aren't there, like his dive gear, everything he would have had on. None of that is shown up at this point. As they have to do, eventually the police call the search off. I mean, the divers are like, listen, we can't find him. He's not in here. And the police are like, we can't find him on the ground. We're not going to keep combing this area. They call it off.
Yeah, it's not that complicated of a cave, really. I mean, it's twisty and long, but there's not that many side passages to get lost in.
For the most part, I am in agreement with Joe. I know, Devin, that you feel a little different, but when I watch that, though the walls do undulate, they are essentially a straight line. From the overview, from space, if you look at this cave, it seems to kind of be in a bit of a bend, maybe almost an S shape as it goes away. But for the most part, it's a tube that goes straight in the ground.
I will agree with that for the moment.
Yeah.
So there's no giant offshoots.
No, there's
point. It's not as if you can go.
As far as we know, but there are places where there are holes, between where the floor is and the wall. That who knows what's behind there? Because frankly, every single person who has gone into this cave has to care for their life and wants to come back alive, so they're not going to stick their head in there. So we don't know if there is a cavern in there, if somebody did squeeze in there, anything like that.
So something to go along with that, and why there may actually be offshoots that we don't know, is the floor counts from divers who have been stuck in sandalanches, I believe they called it. It's very sandy, and they went into something, and then the sand started coming in, the silt started coming in, and they had to dig themselves out, and for every 2 shovelfuls out, or 1 out, 2 seemed to come in, and it took them a while to get some headway to get back out. So yes, it is entirely possible that he squeezed in a hole, and he knocked something loose, and the hole closed behind him. That is possible, and that could be some giant tunnel offshoot that we don't know.
One of the other things they found was his shovel.
They believe.
They think.
Somebody's shovel.
They think it's his shovel because it was placed very deep in the cave, but they don't know that it was Ben's. But it's believed to be his, yes.
And it apparently matched the description of a picture.
Which is a standard issue folding shovel.
Oh yeah, no, it could have been anybody's, but it also could have been Ben's.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, the thing about it is I used to know some cavers. I did caving myself, and there's always the real hardcore ones really, really want to push the cave. That means that if they find some little crack or crevice or hole, they'll go try to force their body into it to see if they can actually, break through and find another room or another cave or something like that.
Yes.
And the thing about it is even the hardcore cavers that I used to know would never do something like that by themselves.
Well,
I mean, it's like,
Yeah, well,
you want to, when you get stuck, you want to have somebody grab your feet and pull you back out of that hole.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is very imperative.
You really do.
Yeah.
So back to the McDaniels, though.
Oh, yeah.
Ben's family.
Yeah.
So while they're there, remember I said they were there while the search was going on, and then once the search was called off, what they decided to do was and this is the part that I told you they did where they kind of bungled things and they really made people mad, is they put out a $10,000 reward for someone to find their son's body, because at this point they know he's dead, but they say we'll give
they think he's
they're
dead.
pretty sure. They'll give $10,000 to anyone who is, as they put it, brave enough to go find him.
Yeah, which obviously was not a good choice of words.
No, because all of the cave divers are like, are you kidding? Do you know how much danger I put myself into going in this cave looking for him in the first place? And the cave diving community is up in arms, and they are saying, listen, you need to pull back this reward offer. You're going to get somebody killed. The McDaniels on their part, they ignore that. They increase the reward not once but twice to the tune of $30,000 total in the end.
Eventually, they took that away. But
they did.
They took it down.
Only after a gentleman by the name of Larry Higginbotham, and he's from Biloxi, Mississippi. March 2012, he drowned in the cave, And it's believed, not confirmed, but people were pretty sure he was going in there and looking for Ben because he was having a hard time and he needed some cash.
Yeah.
He thought he evidently said something about finding this guy and collecting the reward.
He had also been following the case. I mean,
Yeah.
he was a cave diver who
Yes.
had been following the case
He was.
since it started. So
Mhm.
it wasn't just like out of the blue. Oh, $30,000. I've never done this before, but
Yeah.
I'll do it.
Yeah.
No, absolutely not.
I gotta say that must really suck to be that moment when you kind of
I don't want to think about it. No.
Yeah, let's stop right there.
Okay,
Don't
I won't even
don't
think.
want to think that through at all. The
Yeah.
moment when you realize you're out of air.
Yeah, or gonna be out of there.
So Ben's parents did eventually withdraw the offer of the reward. They've still been very active in regards to the case. They are still very active on social media and anywhere that discusses the case. I've seen them come up in discussions threads from articles all over the place. Chances are they're probably listening to us right now.
Possible.
And if
That's it.
they are listening, I do want to give my condolences for the loss of Ben and Paul.
Yeah,
I feel
both.
terrible for these
Yeah,
people.
seriously,
All of
me
us,
too.
yeah.
We all do. And by the way, we've been saying so. I think that Ben was a good guy. It's like we're saying stuff like he was an incompetent cave diver.
I'm questioning.
Well, I'm an incompetent cave diver too, and I'm also a much more incompetent scuba diver than Ben.
Yeah, I've had a respirator in a tank once, and I was in a swimming pool.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what I'm doing, but okay. Well, that is our story.
Okay, well,
That took a long time.
yeah. Goodbye, everybody.
So at this point, we should probably go ahead and get into the theories.
Yeah.
And there are 3 very different theories.
Yeah,
It's actually kind of an easy one. There's 3 simple
Yeah,
theories.
Chippy, UFO, drowning.
Yeah.
I thought Bigfoot was in there. No, it's not drowning. It's
underwater,
Bigfoot.
underwater Bigfoot.
Underwater Bigfoot.
Yeah, that sounds like a song.
Loch Ness Monster.
Underwater Bigfoot.
You don't think the Loch Ness Monster did it?
Oh, that's true, Desi.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Nobody's actually proved that this cave does not connect up with Loch Ness.
True. Nobody has.
Nobody. Yeah, show me the proof. No, ain't there.
Oh, this is one of the moments when I love working with you, Joe. Okay, let's go to theory number 1.
Yep.
All right.
Which is that Ben is still in the cave.
Yeah, he crawled into some tight little crawl that he shouldn't have done.
So
And
here's something that people need to know about what this is. Sadly, what people have figured out after the fact. What happens to cave divers when their bodies are retrieved? They tend to, when they're running low on oxygen, panic.
Weird.
yeah,
Strange, I know.
Yeah, go figure.
And what happens is their bodies tend to be found in little cracks and crevices that they're trying to squeeze themselves through in the mistaken belief that that is the way out. They're panicking, they're thrashing.
That's the way to the surface. It's that crack in the ceiling.
Yeah, and so they get into it, and then that's where they die, and that's where their body stays, and that's where it's found.
But yeah.
So it's possible, as we talked about, he could have been freaking out and gone into some teeny little crevice and stuck into an area. And
I mean, frankly, he could have been not even a little bit freaking out and got himself into a little area that he thought was going to be, because I think one of the things that we kind of glossed over is that he was very vocal around Vortex Springs and saying that he was going to discover, he was going to find a different part of the cave, and he was going to go deeper than anybody else ever had, and he was going to find all this new stuff.
he had a lot of bravado.
He did, and it wouldn't surprise me that if he saw something, he was like, "Oh, I can fit in that crack.
Yeah, bad.
There's got to be something interesting in there, and I can fit in there."
Be a bad idea.
That he went through there and then got stuck.
Well, it's
The only-
it's possible that he went through and he got stuck because it was a dead end and he couldn't get back out, or like we talked about
With the sand
before, the
avalanches.
sand
Yeah.
fills in the hole, and there's no evidence of him having been there.
Or, his line got cut.
I don't think he was diving with a line.
No, I mean his, like...
It was
Oh,
like
his
air hose?
airline.
Air hose,
Airline.
yeah.
Okay,
Sorry.
I don't know how it could have gotten cut though, unless somebody actually cut it. 'Cause there's
Well, if he had been, like, shimmying under rocks I don't know.
I didn't see a lot of sharp rocks down there.
I
Really.
didn't either, but
it's
you know.
limestone.
Yeah,
It's limestone,
that's
so
true,
there's
that's
not a
true.
whole lot of
Yeah.
really jagged edges.
The only problem I have, I know I'm the one who's saying it could have been this, but here's the reason that it wasn't, is that as far as I can tell, all of the cave divers that went down there afterwards reported seeing no disturbances.
Yeah.
And let's talk about that briefly. Okay, so people who are listening, what you need to remember is that it is a silty bottom, so if you run your fin through it, you're going to leave an obvious mark. If you're squeezing through a hole, you're going to scrape the stone and leave marks, because there's algae and stuff growing on the rocks, and you're going to scrape that off with your suit and your helmet and your arms and your tanks and all of that. You're going to leave very obvious signs on the walls and the floor and the ceiling.
Yeah.
And there were none.
Yeah.
That stood out as this is brand new. And this, weird, there's a bunch of scrape marks that go into this sandy thing that's just here. Like that wasn't what happened.
Yeah. And it does sound like it wasn't very frequent that people were going down into this cave. I mean, I don't think it was one of those things where you would be able to say, well, you know, somebody went down a day or two before him, so...
So it wasn't one of those things where there were, like, you know, several people a day going
But
in
I
there?
don't know that for sure.
I don't know the traffic. I have
Yeah.
nothing that has ever said what the traffic in that cave is.
Yeah.
So
But there
I have
was
no
the one
idea.
report, one guy who went down like really, really deep, who was this, you know, legendary
Oh,
get
yeah.
deeper. And,
Was it
and
Ed
he
Sorensen?
said there was evidence of no one having ever been as far in as he was.
Correct.
Yeah,
So-
that's true. I'm assuming that most of the divers that played around in Vortex Springs probably stayed above 100 feet.
They
correct?
do.
Yeah.
They do.
Yeah.
So I talked about for divers that do die in caves is that they tend to cram themselves into little holes. There's also been a number of cave divers who have disappeared, and everybody has gone looking for them, and for several years couldn't find them. And then 5-10 years later, somebody's bopping along, kind of like what Devin was saying, and suddenly spotted an opening, because again, it's pitch black. You only have your lights. So if you're not at the right angle, you may not see it. And they have gone through a bend, and they've looked up, and there is a mask on the floor and a wetsuit full of bones. Mm-hmm. It does happen that way.
In this
And there's
case-
been a great number of number of divers have been found that way.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen in this
I don't
case.
think so, because that again,
I'm
that's
with
not
Joe on
that's
that.
not that complicated.
But
as a
also,
cave.
in Ben's Vortex, when the dive team went down, they went down with a high definition camera and a pretty solid light. I felt
They-
like you could see anywhere that anybody
had-
could have gone.
They had
a lot of
They
technology.
had banks of lights for that
Oh,
one.
yeah.
Yeah, they really illuminated it well.
So it felt like you could see everything, and there wasn't really any just
No, they didn't seem to
crevasse
come
that
across
somebody
that.
missed.
Now, the thing about you said, Joe, earlier is that Ben was saying that he was going to find the end and he was going to find things that people had never done before. Again, this is one of those things that his dad, I don't know how his dad's came upon this, but his dad said online that everybody went the wrong way in the cave, and that if they would just go the right way, they would find Ben.
That makes a lot of sense.
No, I know you're joking, but it
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense to me, because everything I've seen on this, nothing supports that. So I don't even know where Mr. McDaniels got that information.
He's never been in there. I mean, I'm sure he's seen the same maps that we've seen.
I'm sure he has,
You
if
know?
not better ones.
And it sounds to me like many divers dove all the way as far as they could squeeze through.
Although I guess the interesting thing is, oh gosh, was her name Jill from Ben's Vortex?
Yeah.
Jill Heinrich.
Yeah, she said that when she looked at the map that Ben had been making, that it didn't correspond at all
She's not the only one who
with
said
her understanding of the cave. So I guess that is an interesting thing, whether he was mapping it poorly or maybe he did.
Discovered
Maybe he
some new
was
passage.
going a different way. I don't know. Maybe he wasn't. Maybe there is some hole that leads to a different part out of the, piano room, for instance, right? So that he hadn't actually been jumping the gate this entire time, that there was some random hole that he had discovered, and that's how he went. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't think so,
I
but
doubt
I don't know.
Well, because I don't know how many divers. I got the sense at least a couple of dozen divers went down there searching the cave.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And
It was a lot.
Hundreds of hours of dive time were logged looking for him.
yeah, and I can't believe if Ben found some hole somewhere, I can't believe those guys didn't find it too.
I would agree with that, unless
Yeah.
there was That's worth mentioning, I guess, too. But there's some other really compelling evidence against him not being in there.
Against him being in there, or against him not being in there?
Against him being in there.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, yeah.
And that is, the cave is full of aquatic life, specifically eels, which are carnivores.
Yeah.
And so if there had been a body in the water, there should have been increased activity